Sure. So Gödel is specifically concerned with dictatorship. So, with that respect, which statement would it contradict if dictatorship is established? Is there a specific kind of statement in the Constitution that we can find?
And that is the $64 question. And let me say, before I believe the answer to that question is yes. But before I say what I think the answer to the question is, and a few others, as I've been searching the literature, and I realized even before I wrote the paper, there were a number of legal blogs where scholars were speculating. And at the time, I wasn't too familiar with blogs. I'm embarrassed to admit, and so I wasn't able to cite all of the literature. But it's very important to note that Gödel is Austrian, though he was born in what today is the Czech Republic. And in essence, he's from Central Europe. And it's also very important to note that he doesn't, immigrate to the United States permanently, never to see Europe again until December 1939. One of the last of those intellectuals to leave Europe during the tumult of the Second World War, one of the last ones to leave. And the other important note, this is sort of historical, right? To put all of the logic and mathematics and formal analysis in context, is that practically every single country in Central Europe, most famously beginning with Germany and the rise to power, Hitler being appointed chancellor, the Reichstag, the national parliament, enacting an enabling act in March of 1933, authorizing the chancellor to rule by decree. But every single country in Central Europe somehow, either ended up becoming a military dictatorship or what I call in my paper a legalistic dictatorship, like in Germany, where technically the dictatorship was legal. If you look on the rules on the pieces of paper, right, of the Weimar Republic that perished, at that moment.
So what you mean is that they became dictatorships without any amending done to the constitutions that were in place, right?
Well, in the case of Germany, yes, for the military dictatorship. So a famous one would be the Kingdom of Poland, and there was a famous standoff in 1926 with a great marshal, and he assumes power. There's a coup. So many of these dictatorships, were military dictatorships, where there was a use of force, right, to overthrow Kingdom of Yugoslavia, many different examples. What's remarkable is that every single country in Central Europe, every single country, ultimately will during this interwar period. Admittedly, it was a short period of democracy because most of the countries were, part of the Hungarian, Austrian Empire. So these were short-lived democracies. So I wanted to preface that this is another reason to take Gödel seriously, because he's witness to history, and he's saying, and while he himself is not a political person, all his biographers agree that he would like to go to coffee houses. He would read the newspaper. He was aware of what was going on in his world. And so I think the statement that he identified is in the United States Constitution, and in different constitutions, this is located in different provisions. But Article 5, and Article 5 is what authorizes amendments to the Constitution. It sort of allows you to make changes to the rules or create new rules or delete or remove all, existing rules. And so I think that is the possibility of now there's one logical sort of leap you have to make here is, can you change this? So the amendment clause, the amending clause in Article 5 allows you to add new things to the Constitution, change existing parts of the Constitution, right? And remove things in the Constitution. But can you change the amendment rule itself? Can Article 5 be used to amend itself? I think that is really, I think this is the, this possibility of and I analogize here to the literature and self-reference, a statement that refers to itself. That is the essence of my conjecture. with regard to Goodell's loophole.
Right. So then, how practical is that observation? Right. So, is it conceivable that it could be applied in a in the most unbelievable situation, or is it a purely theoretical result with respect to this specific U.S. Constitution example? You think?
This is where it gets tricky. Goodell's own friends and witnesses to his citizenship hearing, none other than Albert Einstein, and someone who may be known to your audience, Oscar Morgenstern, who is, along with Johnny von Neumann, one of the greatest mathematicians of all time. They wrote a book together and created a new field of game theory of games. They seem to think this was a kind of a far-fetched hypothetical. But I will tell you, and I'd have to go back to my paper. At the time, when I write the paper, this is pre-Donald Trump. At the time, scholars looking at the Constitution were saying, it's very hard to change the Constitution. It's very hard to make amendments. In fact, there have only been, excluding the Bill of Rights, when there was a package of 10 amendments. Actually, it was 12 amendments, 10 of which were ratified in 1789 at the founding, after the first Congress, if you will. Only 17 additional amendments have been ratified. Many have been proposed, but only a small subset have been ratified because it is difficult. Procedurally, you need supermajority. It's a two-step procedure, and you need supermajorities in both steps. The reason why I think it's not as far-fetched and hypothetical is because scholars have very recently proposed we should make it easier to amend the Constitution.
Wow.
We should get rid of the second step. The second step basically consists of after the Congress proposes an amendment, and you need 2/3 votes in both houses of Congress in the United States to propose an amendment to the Constitution, which in itself is very difficult. Then 3/4 of the state legislatures, or 3/4 of all of the states meeting in state conventions. A very high number of states then must ratify 3/4 of the 50 states. And so some scholars propose, let's get rid of that second step. Let's have Congress can both propose and ratify an amendment. And what's then to prevent? Why not then have Congress vote by a simple majority to propose an amendment? And we keep the 3/4, or reduce the state ratification to 2/3, or reduce the state ratification to simple majority. I say all of these scenarios that, may be far-fetched, may be hypothetical, to say that my conjecture is this is what I believe what Goodell's concern was, that the amendment clause could be amended to make it easier to amend the Constitution. I only say this because in Germany, and to use the particular example of the Weimar Republic and Hitler's consolidation of power, the Weimar Constitution authorized changes to the fundamental charter, to the Constitution of Weimar Republic, with 2/3 vote of the Reichstag, of the national parliament, and any part of the Constitution could be amended. And so, what is far-fetched is to have an amendment, proposing the president in the United States, the president to rule by decree. That is far-fetched. What is not far-fetched, would be an amendment to make it easier to amend the Constitution. Mm-hmm. And that is sort of independent of what Godel found, and I think that is the Godelian loophole. I think that's the concern, because if it's easier to amend the Constitution, then in the time of a national emergency, then one can imagine, if all I need is a simple majority to amend the Constitution, for example, then let's give power to the president on a temporary basis, So I think that is the concern. Amending the amendment clause, to make it easier in the future to then amend any other part of the Constitution.